my feet, who will hold me in the power of service. I clothe myself this day with covering for my head from the glare of sun and heat, and I abandon myself this day to those who need my clear thoughts, who trust me to speak in words of truth. I clothe myself this day with garments to warm me from the shivering of rain and cold. I abandon myself this day to the naked skin of love, which has no protection but itself. You are love, God. Be our heartbeat, the amen of love, faithful forever, steadfast and sure. Amen.
Amen.
So welcome to all of you this morning. I'd like us to begin to think about this DOCC program as like a prayer shawl. We'll call it a DOCC shawl. And those threads or those patterns that are in that shawl are the topics and the themes that we've covered so far. We've talked about listening. We've talked about a covenantal relationship with God. We've talked about community and Jesus and the kingdom of God. And then we've talked about overcoming fear, and we've talked about love. And finally, we had our lifelines this Saturday. I hope those of you that were able to do them found it a meaningful and powerful experience. And hopefully those that still need to do them will have that opportunity very soon in your small groups to do that. So love is going to continue to be a theme in our DOCC program, and particularly that agape love. Because with DOCC we're exploring the heart of Christian faith. So to do that, this return to love is really about the power of love and that great commandment from Jesus, right? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your might, and to love one another. It's very easy to say, not always so easy to do, right? So I want to do just a tad of review because I think it's important. A few weeks back, David talked about agape love. And I'm going to use agape as a kind of an adjective, as descriptive for love, just to kind of help us in this context. And agape is that divine love from God. God is love, defined, and she's defined as being loved. Love. And it has nothing to do with the worthiness of the object to which we're focusing our love. Agape love just pours out. It's a love that when we can get out of the way of ourselves and we can offer that love to another. This is our Christian mandate, to love one another with the agape love. And it's, again, not based on feelings. It's an act of will. And the best description, which I think David offered to us that's important, is that agape responds to another's legitimate needs. That we're responding to another's legitimate needs and we're getting out of the way of our own. That's the steadfast love that God offers us. And it's up to us whether we choose to accept that love or not. That love from God does not ever go away. It's what everyone wants, right? We all want that love, like the shelter, the water, the food. And so today, what I want to do is, in the context of talking about agape, it's how giving and receiving agape love changes us. What does that look like? And that really, as the more we can give to others, the more we can, we receive and allow ourselves to receive love from God and from others, the more we will continue to be able to give others. So, just to remember that love is about responding to another's legitimate needs and getting out of the way of our own. So in the DOCC program, there's a short story that has been shared over the years, and I think it's, as I was trying to think up a better story or another story, this one I kept coming back to, and I think you'll see why. It describes that divine kind of unconditional love, the agape love that God offers. And this is from a short story called The Expert on God by John LaRoe, and he's describing a newly ordained priest. And instead of being confirmed in his faith, the new priest is filled with doubts. And they run the gamut from the Trinity, to Jesus' full presence in the Eucharist. And then once he kind of gets those figured out, he moves on to not sure about this perpetual virginity of Mary, or whether Jesus is fully human and fully God. And eventually he gets to a point where he just suppresses these doubts. And all that remains for him is what's described as an awful lingering and an unspeakable ache. So the one doubt that did not pass particularly was the one that caused him the most anxiety, and that was the love of God. The priest couldn't shake this, as hard as he tried. So as fate has it, he's been at church celebrating the Eucharist on Christmas morning, and on his way home, he encounters a car accident. So off to the side, he sees one car that is partially turned on its side, and then on the other adjoining field, he sees another car that's been crumpled into kind of two pieces. So he grabs his vial of holy oil, and he rushes to this twisted car, it's a sports car, to lend whatever assistance he can. And he forces himself into the car to cradle the head of a teenage boy. And he quickly realizes the boy is dying and he needs to offer last rites. Well, this priest becomes frustrated at the ineffectiveness of what he's doing. He doesn't think it's effective. And so LaRoe writes, the priest's doubts became certainty. And he said it doesn't matter. But it did matter, and he knew it somehow. But what could anyone say to this crushed, dying young person? What would God say if he cared as much as I do? So this young boy shakes and kind of shudders in agony, chokes on some blood, and that begins to pour from his mouth. And the priest could see that death is starting to ease across the boy's face. And still the priest could say nothing. So with this young boy's head in his arms, trusting like a lover, at once this priest, faithless and unrepentant, gave up his prayers. And he just bent to him, and he kept whispering, fierce and burning in his voice, I love you, I love you, I love you. So when power and knowledge failed in that moment, the only thing left was love. That's the agape love. That priest was simply present, he just got out of the way of himself, and he could be present with that love, that agape love for that young person. Now, I never wish this experience on anyone, as I'm sure any of us would. But this story represents an opportunity that this priest had. And while it's very dramatic for us, it's a way of being able to say that any experience, particularly those that surprise us and catch us off guard the most, whether it's daily, whether it's ordinary, whether it's extraordinary, we have an opportunity to offer that love. And when we do, it can change us. It can change us in different ways. It's hard to find. It's not the kind of thing that we can necessarily go looking for, but it will be there for us because God is constantly providing that steadfast love to us. And if we are able to receive that, we'll be able to offer it to others in that changed way that will be necessary in that particular circumstance. Now that we've done our lifelines, I would say that I'd like to share just a moment in kind of where that agape love has happened for me. And two examples would be as a hospital chaplain. When you go in You often don't know, or as a chaplain, who you're going to see when you go into a hospital room. But all I can do is be present to that person. I don't know their history, I don't know their story, and often I don't know them at all. But if I can go in there and simply be present to that stranger in that moment, that's what I can offer them. And to be able to try and say, I love you, or to offer love in some way. Another way is for a former husband and adult children. Not always easy. But I have that choice to either take as a gift what once was in some relationships, but what is now. And can I see that what I had was a gift and how it can inform me in my ministry now? And the last one I want to mention, because I think it's so important for me being here at St. Luke's in particular, is on Sunday mornings when people come to the altar rail. There's something that happens, that mystery of faith that happens in some form, that when people come to that altar rail, everything gets shed almost of what I know or a conversation I had with a particular person that week. All I know is that what I'm putting into the hand of many of you and of others is the body of Christ. The love of Christ is in that little wafer. And to me, that's such a privilege, and it's an incredible gift to be able to do that, because that for me is how I'm trying to be changed, informed in my own ways in my ongoing ministry, but also to try to see and know Christ in each of you as you come, often very vulnerable, to that communion rail. So again, this is always about God's unconditional love and that agape love. So there are a few ways we can at least position ourselves to see if we can receive or have a taste of that unconditional love. And here are a few ways that I might suggest. Some will seem very practical, and I hope they are, because I don't want this to feel like some abstract, hard thing for us to get our arms around, but in fact, is right there for us. And as a matter of fact, it's in us already. Seek what's beautiful in nature and in music and literature. And see if you can forget yourselves. Have you had those moments where you've been out for a walk or listening to music and all of a sudden you forget time? And you can just be present to whatever that is. And often when that happens, I want to believe that the composer or the creative nature was also lost in his or her own thoughts and able to create those moments, because then I can feel them as well. Look for silver linings in those experiences, both the good, the bad, the ugly. If you can find them, you might also, again, feel that taste of love and feel a way of changing and shifting a little bit in how you're experiencing the love of one another or toward another circumstance. Another way to position might be to think about prayer or about meditation, about going simple. Meredith, you talked on Sunday, and Chris about ways that they are intentionally making their Advent more simple and more intentional. And I believe by doing that, you can grow in that relationship as a disciple of Christ. And of course, seeking and serving all people, the community suppers. For me, one of the greatest gifts is to be able to sit down and have a conversation with someone that comes, one of our guests that's at the dinner, and hear a story and hear where they are in any given present moment. So once we can find a few ways that are intentional for us to kind of position ourselves to seek that kind of desire for the agape love, we'll begin to experience how we're changing. But it's like any kind of muscle, physical muscle. The spiritual muscle has to be worked too. And I think by all of you coming to this DOCC program is also part of working that spiritual muscle. I bet after those lifelines on Saturday, everybody was a little tired and doing that time of reflection and the importance of it, but it deepens our faith. It deepens our relationships with others. So this Quaker pastor and author Philip Gulley wrote a book called If the Church Were Christian a few years back, and it explores what we're calling today emerging Christianity. And he's talking about some of the changes that are afoot. And this is in the context of how the church is changing. And I believe some of his thoughts are really touching on this idea of how receiving agape love changes us, and of course then changes the church. And he says, rather than focusing on brokenness and kind of looking at kind of self-rejection, he says, look at self-potential. What more can we offer that's already in us? What is that love, for instance, that we can offer that's endless? I mean, God is constantly pouring that love to us. So the well is deep. Another thing he said too was that if we can't believe in our head, can we believe with our feet, like the priest did? You know, we spend so much time up here and we kind of get cut off at the neck. But how can we get down into that heart space where we find that love? Can we let go of kind of those thoughts and what's going on upstairs and get a little lower into letting God? Becoming free of some destructive patterns. What are some things we know that we get stuck doing? For me, it's often trying to be a mom to boys that are now grown up as adults. And what worked when they were little kids just ain't gonna work now. Even some of my relationships with friends, particularly those that have gone through life experiences now. We can't have the same relationship that we had years ago as teenagers or as young adults or even as young moms. Another one is, can we personally seek over looking at group uniformity, for instance, instead of kind of that group think? Can we on our own find that confidence enough to explore what we need to find and not look for a cookie cutter way of thinking? Often I like to use the analogy of the storefront. You know, we love to fill our storefronts with certain ways that we think we should be or that people want us to be. And yet, when we go through the door, or when our loved ones go through the door, we see our real selves inside, kind of hidden behind that storefront. Our humanity is there, it's present, but can we get that out to where we can put that more in those windows of who we truly are? Another one is with agape love, or if we can find that and begin to use it, we can grow in our capacity for intimacy. And Gulley says that we should care more about love than about sex. So can we let down our facade enough to be open to people, particularly those that we know are seeking something more? And where can we find that? Can we surround ourselves and seek out those people that can help us with that? And finally, Gulley says, life in this world is more important than the afterlife. Let God worry about the afterlife. We're here. The kingdom is here right now. This is where we are, what we're doing in the present. So can we see this world, this fragile earth? You know, it's called our island home in the Book of Common Prayer. Can we see that it's already infused with agape love? Can we receive it? And the more we receive it, we find it and we receive it, the more that we'll be able to give it to others. And in the process, hopefully, we're being changed and we'll be changing others through love, not by ourselves trying to change someone, but through that love that God gives us here. And so as Jesus says, to the one who has, more will be given. So what do you want to have, What do you need more of so that you'll be able to share it with others then? So in loving others with that agape love, remember it's responding to those legitimate needs of others, but it's getting out of the way so that we can be open to God's love, feeling that infused in ourselves, in this world, in this time, in this day, in this moment, and be able to share it with others. So, you're going to have a lot to chew on this morning. And we've got some questions for you for your small groups. And I hope that you'll have some good discussion about how we can be changed by that agape love. And first off, what your experience of some of that love is and how it has changed you, or how you might like to see it be yourself be changed. So enjoy.